Yo, what's up, man? So, I think it's really important for people, for our culture as a human race, as a human species, to understand where we've been, where we're going. Where are we going? Where have we been? Um, and that, that worldview is super important. Because if you think that everything's just going great in the world, then there's not a need for change, right? I mean, if this, that's what the government seeks, and in general, just people who are in power right now, they seek the status quo. They seek, change is the enemy, and we are seeking change, especially spiritual change, change in worldview, and so where do we come from? Where are we going? Simply, we come from, like I think it's super important to understand the micro social units, macro social units, know what that means, know where we're going, and that it's not sustainable. The tribes, the family, the individual, that progression. Societies with higher levels of technology are going to be more, they're going to have aged more. So it's not really that they're more evolved, but they are older. And why are they older? Because they have to choose. So technology forces you to choose a path. It forces you to make a decision. And so, and technology, so that's basically just consciousness. It's the same. See, the history of human evolution is the same. Human evolution as a species is the same as the history of evolution of one human being. So how does the history of one human being happen? A baby's born, they're very dependent. They have no freedom, like of thought, of movement, of anything, right? They're dependent. They're totally dependent upon their parents to raise them, or whoever's raising them, right? So it's dependence. It's total dependence. And then it moves into independence. As they grow older, they get, their brain starts growing. They become smarter. They become stronger physically. Everything starts developing, right? And that forces them to choose. Consciousness comes into play. They start understanding things, and you're forced to choose. You're forced to choose a road. Whether you like it or not, you have to choose. You can't stay in that, dependence state with no responsibility. You have to move into responsibility eventually. And so the same thing happens in societies with technology. Technology forces us into choosing and into responsibility because it gives us more power. Technology gives us more power and forces us to choose. So just like one human being, as one human being grows, what happens? They start becoming independent, but initially independence is not wise. Teenagers are not wise. Everyone knows that. They're stupid. They think they're Superman, they can do anything, they're invincible, and they do stupid things. And because they're experimenting with these choices and with power and with their newfound freedom that they have. I no longer have to, this is what they say, I no longer have to obey my parents. I no longer have to obey anyone. I can do what I choose. And they're experimenting with new things, right? But they don't have the knowledge yet to discern what's good and what's not good, right? And so now, of course, they come from pure consciousness, and they're a lot livelier. They're very loving in many ways. They connect very easily with people because that's what they come from, right? And so that's the evolution, right? They're going from dependence to independence. But independence forces you to choose. So what happens with the cycle of one human being? They go into teenage life, they go into 20s. Eventually the norm is, the normal is that you have some type of relationship and you breed, you reproduce. And then what happens then is that you start coming back. It's like a going and a returning, right? It's like the hero's journey. It's the same thing. It's the going of independence, of the individual, of ego, of finding your way. And then it's the coming back. It's the unity. It's the love. It's the choosing to come back. Choosing to come back towards the unity, towards the group, towards responsibility, towards service, towards love. But it's the choosing to do so, to come back. That's when you find wisdom. That's when you find, and we're still in that process of it. Humanity's kind of like a teenager now, especially like the United States. That's what it seems like. They're just, it's all about the me, the me, the me. And so humanity, as humanity grows, technology grows, right? We're all going from tribe to family to individual. Everything's all individualized now. And on the macro level, everything's getting bigger and bigger, more and more control from power structures, governments, corporations, things like that. They're getting more and more powerful. And individuals are becoming more and more individualized. Everything is internet. Now everyone just watches TV on their own, watches their own cell phone. They don't even interact much anymore. And it's just getting worse and worse. It's more and more individualized. So where does this end, Where does this end? Like eventually spirituality corrects it. There's corrections. Like market corrections in the stock market. Like, nature has forest fires, corrections. When there's spiritual imbalances, there's corrections. And, we don't know what's going to happen, but we're trying to make this transformation in consciousness for people to wake up to what's going on. It seems, because it's not sustainable. If we don't wake up, it's not going to be sustainable, the world we live in. Why isn't it sustainable? Because the spiritual fabric is just becoming destroyed, and that creates an unsustainable society, because then we get more and more away from our nature, which is love, which is, freedom, which love brings freedom, love begets freedom. And so we get further and further away from that, and then that's why it's not sustainable. But if we keep on believing in the status quo, we're never going to leave there. And the great destroyer of, the only way, in my opinion, to get out of it is through my posture on nonviolence. If we can understand that, if we can understand the nonviolent solution, the changing consciousness solution towards nonviolence. And it's just, I just see us so far away from that now. And a lot of it has to do with, our religious leaders. Christianity's totally silent on that. All major religions in Christianity are completely silent on that. And it's sad to see that, because you see that religion is just politicized. Religion is no longer pure. It's just, they preach things that are convenient for the status quo. They don't preach things that are true. And they do teach a lot of things that are true, but the important things, the super important things like nonviolence, are not taught, because they're not culturally acceptable, and they're not culturally acceptable in part, mainly because people aren't willing to take that jump into nonviolence. And then, of course, governments and corporations, and they form culture along with individuals, and then it becomes almost impossible to break that cycle, because once you're entrenched in a culture, a very strong culture, you just speaking of like nonviolence is super, it's like ridiculed, it's not even taken seriously, it's just. And so anyway, it does make me mad, though. It makes me a little mad to see, especially Christianity, because I consider myself a Christian. There's a lot of viewpoints that we don't understand about Jesus. Like, if Jesus isn't here to defend himself, right? Or to say, exactly what he believes in or what he doesn't believe in, right? We only have a few books, ancient books, that have been, translated, handed on through generation to generation for thousands of years. It's hard even to know if any of that was true, right? But one thing we know for certain is that Jesus believed in nonviolence and believed in loving your enemies. That is something that's super crystal clear. And I'll put in the next video, like this video I made about, can a Christian be a soldier? The oaths you have to take to become a soldier versus just the basic core of what Jesus taught on the Sermon on the Mount. It's totally contradictory, and so if you can't act in violence, then your whole worldview changes. It has to change, because it just has to change, because everything changes after that. So I invite you to give it a consideration. Give nonviolence, give it a chance to live in your consciousness as truth. Because truth, a lot of this is just going there in your conscience, because what happens is you have deep levels of conscience beliefs, worldviews, and then as soon as something foreign to that worldview comes into your consciousness, you immediately stop, you ridicule, but you don't give it a serious thought, a serious consideration, because you don't want to change those core beliefs. So let's just try and take a look at our core beliefs. And a lot of our core beliefs, is people are so trusting in big institutions, and it drives me nuts. They trust the government so much. They think the government's benevolent. They're doing the right thing. And it's that, aligning with power type deal. They don't want to go against, the big institutions, the big government. And just in general, it's like peer pressure. It's like being in high school again, You don't want to be the oddball. You don't want to be the odd guy out. And that's the biggest force, is that peer pressure, that people are still super, subject to, which is our culture. And so it's clear that truth has to be, you're going to have to go against the grain, especially us pioneers. If you want to pioneer any type of movement or revolution, conscience revolution, nonviolent revolution, love revolution, that will change the world, we're going to have to go against the grain. And we will eventually. So anyway, I think this is kind of a long video, but so where are we going? We're going wherever we want to go. Do we want to end up in World War III, in huge, economic collapse, in, the world in turmoil? All of the movies, the sci-fi movies, repeat us the same image over and over of, Hunger Games and this and that, and the end of technology and blah, 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 and, the zombies, and, you know what I mean? That's one route, but in order for it to be a brighter future, an amazing future of hope, of amazing developments in cultural spirit, in awareness and development, in ending poverty and ending violence, where we're one with nature. Can we achieve this? Of course we can, but it's going to have to take a change in consciousness. So it's kind of like, because if we continue the way we're doing without the status quo, we'll end up that way. It'll end up just like they say in the movies, a collapse, a war, a this, a that, mass extinction of, 2/3 of the population of Earth, blah, blah, blah. And we're headed towards that unless we make this change in consciousness. And of course we can only do it. We can't do it with fear. Like we can't be of the approach where we say, if you don't do this, you're going to end up bad, so you better do this, Instead of that, let's see the bright side of what the possibilities are if we change our consciousness. And what you should see is your own personal life, how your own personal life is going to change. And that's the important thing. It's not so much a worldview and doing it for the world. Just do it for yourself, do it for your spouse, do it for your kids, do it for your parents if you're a kid, do it for your neighbors, do it for your friends, do it for your coworkers, do it, because it will change your life, your consciousness, your internal peace, your stress, your, things will change in your own life. And as things change in your own life, you're going to develop more and more knowledge, seeking more and more understanding from God. And your worldview is going to, start changing. And so don't do it for the world. Don't do it, but do it to improve your own life. Be selfish. Improve your own life. You don't have to go get drunk every weekend at the bar and to feel good, It's just, I'm not saying everyone who gets drunk at the bar is bad, but it's just definitely there's a lot of self-medication going on everywhere in highly developed societies. There's a lot of self-medication, whether it be alcohol, drugs, marijuana now, prescription drugs, and just people can't cope anymore, with consciousness. It's that, and there's a way to cope with consciousness. There's a definite way that you don't need to self-medicate. You don't need to drink. You don't need to, do drugs. You don't need to, you don't need anything. You don't need anyone. You don't need anyone to feel good. You don't need anything. You don't need your kids. You don't need your family. You don't need your wife. You don't need anything, dude. You really don't need anything. But it's just connecting with that consciousness, connecting with that peace, with your own internal peace, And that's the first step, is connecting with your own internal peace, looking inside yourself, taking that jump. Well, it's like jumping off a cliff, because you don't know any better. You don't know anything different. You've never been taught anything different than what the culture has taught you. But if you take that jump and say, let me switch my worldview for a month. Let me change my let me just pretend that I'm changing my worldview for a month, and let's see what happens. Or for a week. Let me just pretend that now I believe in these things, right? And just try it. It's just like trying a diet or something. Try to change your worldview. Try to just pretend. Just pretend for a while and see what happens. See if that changes anything. Try and believe that only love exists. Just pretend for a week. See what happens. See what happens if you go into a lot of these beliefs. Just pretend for a week. Try it on. It's like a diet. It doesn't hurt. The lemonade diet is not going to hurt you if you try it for a week, right? So try it. Try to step into these beliefs for a week. Just try it. See what happens. You might like it. You might like the lemonade diet. You might like this diet. And if you do, you're going to continue doing it. Or maybe it's too much to handle, but in a month later you're going to be like, hey, that was pretty good, I'm going back there. And then in a month later you're going to come back again and again and again. And that's how it starts. So take that first step and say, you know what, screw this, dude. I'm gonna change the way I believe, because in beliefs is everything. Belief is the core of everything. What you believe is what you conceive. Speaking of diets, there are so many diets, and you should eat this, you should eat this. This food will make you good. This food will make you bad. And, there is a lot of truth to eating the right foods and everything. There's higher vibration in certain foods. But in the end, it's all about your beliefs, man. If you eat shit for a week, but you believe that shit is gonna be golden for you, and you believe it's the greatest stuff ever, it is gonna be the greatest stuff ever. Because your consciousness creates your reality. And so your beliefs create your reality. And so if you want to change your beliefs. That's all, man. All right, dude. Later.